Hey everyone, welcome to this edition of Spirit RX Podcast, Ancient Wisdom, Modern Healing. I'm Dr. Michael Hummel. I'm a naturopath, and this is Dr. Luke, quantum extraordinaire chiropractor. So we love to integrate the best practices of modern medicine with ancient remedies and modalities in this podcast, which we're doing live at the same time that we're recording our podcast today to try something different. And we'll answer questions as we see them. We're going to be going between both sides. So if you guys pop on, you pop on. Great. In this podcast, we explore contemporary health and wellness topics with a blend of wisdom, humor, and practical tips for the everyday person. If you want to learn more about us, reach out, check out my website, hummelmed.com. Check out Dr. Luke's website, taleofthesun.com,
Right.
and our businesses to connect with us. So let's go ahead and get started. So what are we talking about today, Dr. Luke?
All right. Today, our topic is about what kind of alternative therapies, modalities that we might refer to our patients. This could be any doctor anywhere in the US or elsewhere where in the world, but sometimes a complementary alternative modality can be an excellent add-on to a medical treatment plan. In some cases, the person may elect to totally go with an alternative modality. But today we're just going to talk about what are some of our favorites that we either recommend to patients or we just know about and think are awesome.
If you're okay, I'll start.
Yeah, do it.
So first thing I wanted to bring up, we had a woman online through TikTok reach out, and she was interested on what type of therapies to consider or options to consider for a degenerative disc disease. I'm assuming in her lumbar, she wasn't specific. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a chiropractor by trade, and so that's right up a chiropractor's wheelhouse. Y- You want to go to a good chiropractor that's going to, in your case especially, take some x-rays, get some imaging, and there will be some adjustments that likely you will want to take that are going to really make a big difference. Beyond that, there are other things you can do, but I think some exercises are exceptionally important here. And with that, they need to be really specific. Sometimes when a patient comes to me and they say, I've had this back surgery, and then I say, okay, I say, where? And they say, I don't even remember where. For some reason, we don't know what's behind us, even when we've had a surgery. So oftentimes the person can't even really identify where it is. And then I ask this question, did they give you any exercises to do? And almost always I get back a no. And I think that's a huge area where things could be improved. So that can be from your chiropractor to get a list of exercises. There are others in the physical therapist, for example, that might be good. The number one best disc exercise that I recommend is cat cow. Cat cow. Look that up online if you haven't seen that. You're on all fours. Imagine it or envision it like there's a old-fashioned water pump with a handle coming out of the backside of you, and you're arching up into the cat, and then you're swaying like the cow. But as you're doing that, the breath is important, but you want to be able to, we call that imbibing the disc, which
Yeah.
literally means that we're creating a pressure to push more hydration into the disc. Because if we can widen that disc, that will help alleviate some of that structural problem. Oftentimes, there's some imbalances in the body. The core might be weak, for example. So, there's a lot of exercises that can be done that can bring more strength around that area, and so it just takes more pressure off of where the problem is. And there's a lot of other things I could say about that, but those are the two biggest ones that I would suggest.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with what you're recommending in terms of creating that imbibition in the disc. I think that's a big part of helping to rehydrate the discs. There's a lot of nuances with this. So if you have a degenerative disc issue, sometimes that outer layer will be torn, and sometimes it will have already exuded through, the central
Right,
layer will have exuded through. So you have this, what they call annulus fibrosis, with
right.
kind of on the outer portion of it. Then you have the nucleus pulposus on the inner portion. And so it's like this hydrated jelly-like substance, proteoglycans mostly. What happens is as you age and gravity pulls you down over time, it starts to put pressure on it. You don't have as much movement, and pretty soon you're not getting as much nutrients, not getting as much hydration, and
Yes.
that ends up causing the degeneration of the disc. Sometimes there's injuries. So there's a lot of little nuances and complexities. So I like what you're saying in terms of those particular therapies. I think of it like decompression will pull
Yes.
that nucleus pulposus back into the disc. And then there are certain nutrients that you want on board that are going to help it heal, right? You think of collagen in general, collagen production. Copper is part of that process. You want to make sure that you have a good assortment of amino
Right.
acids so you can build the collagen, then lots of hydration. So these are like basic things. And then sometimes it helps to decrease inflammation. So like
Right.
some
Right.
herbs
Right.
are really helpful to do that. Jamaican dogwood is
Mm.
awesome for pain and decreasing inflammation. So these are just some things that
Okay.
can be helpful.
That was a really helpful one to get us started. Let's see. My area is the nervous system. And so there's a lot of modalities that I tend to recommend that are supportive of trying to bring balance to the nervous system. We live in a pretty fast-paced, chaotic world, and it's easy to get under stress or get your nervous system out of balance. And so many of the things that I might recommend as alternative therapies fall in under that category, just because the work I do is in that category. So the first one I'm going to mention is just the work that I do as a chiropractor. The technique that I use is called network spinal. Network spinal, a newer technique, very quantum, and uses very light touch. So there's not the old-fashioned osseous using force adjustments to the vertebra. Just amazing, though. Gets the energy flowing in the body, helps to release tension. So if you don't know about that one, network spinal, definitely investigate that one. Literally has changed my life.
That's an awesome alternative therapy. So what are some other ones you were looking at you wanted to talk about? Any
Yeah.
questions out here from you guys? Anything you can think of you want to learn a little bit more about? So I'm looking over at this right now. So this is Dr. Luke. I'm Dr. Hummel. I'm a naturopathic physician. I practice in Ashland, Oregon. So does Dr. Luke, and
Right.
he's a chiropractic physician. And so he's also practicing in the same
Yeah,
area.
I'll just tag off of that
Doing
one.
good.
Another
Hi.
great modality is Safe and Sound Protocol, SSP. So people that are interested in the nervous system are going to have heard of the vagus nerve. And resetting the vagus nerve, that's like a giant topic that you can find on TikTok, right? There's a lot of approaches to that. All of them can be good, but the father of this modern era of talking about the vagus nerve and how to reset it is Dr. Porges. And he is associated with a company that has actually created a protocol, a listening sound protocol that will help pull the nervous system back towards balance. And the way it works is it's the we're wired that human voice, especially soothing sounds of the human voice, will bring us back towards feeling safe and bring balance to our nervous system. So anyway, they've engineered music. They filtered out the parts that kind of spike our nervous system and increase the ones that emulate the sounds of soothing human voice. And it's an incremental thing, and it's just an awesome modality to add. It can be done in the privacy of a person's own home in most instances. You just have to have some good headphones and you listen in 30-minute sessions, and it's terrific. SSP, so look that one up as well.
So I'll mention this just to help those who might not know this. So the vagus nerve is, I really like to think of it as the long nerve, right? It's the traveler,
The
it's the
Wanderer.
vagabond,
Yeah,
vagus.
that's right.
So it goes from up in the brain, down by the side of the neck, down all the way basically to the abdomen, right? Area.
Yes,
And that nerve is one of the central components to putting your body in what we call a parasympathetic
right.
state. So, what it does is when we're really stressed out, it activates to
Yeah.
calm our nervous system. It calms our heart and has a lot of very beneficial effects in that way. So, when we're talking about resetting the nervous system, we're talking about taking you from that sympathetic, high fight or flight kind of state of mind and body and trying to put you in a parasympathetic state, a state where you're resting and digesting and calm and relaxed. And for some people, they don't need that, and others,
Right.
that's exactly what they need. And most of us do
Well,
in
I'll have like
nowadays.
this week I had a patient ask me, what about cold plunges? So will that help reset my vagus nerve? And I'm like, yes and no. And what I mean by that is we want resiliency in the nervous system. Most of us, if we live indoors all the time, our temperature range is so narrow that our body is not experiencing a wide range of temperature shifts. And so we don't have a lot of resiliency with our internal thermometer, so to speak. And cold plunge could be really good if you, especially if you're going back and forth between, say, hot like a sauna and a cold plunge. However, here's what I would say. If your nervous system is already in a state of hypervigilance with you're just really queued up, the sympathetic tone, you don't want to add more stress to the system too early. So cold plunge would be a great thing that I would recommend after you've calmed that nervous system down. So there are some metrics that we could use. Heart rate variability is an excellent one, and not just the moment by moment data that we might get on a watch or a ring that monitors some of those health things, but we need to know where we are statically. Where's our baseline with that heart rate variability? And then once that's closer to a balance point, then we want to add in those things that will stretch our nervous system more, the hot and the cold, and some of the other techniques that people might talk about.
Yeah, it's interesting. I love that you brought up cold plunges. So I love cold plunges.
Yeah,
They're one of my favorite modalities to throw in for people. So basically, when I think of a cold plunge, there's two sides to that cold plunge. One is you are basically creating a shock to your system.
right.
That's the
That's
side
right.
you're like pointing out. When you first get in, it is shocking to your body. And for people who have are stuck in a really high sympathetic state or have really bad hypertension or cardiovascular concerns, that can actually be dangerous.
Yes.
So you have to be careful with even something as simple as hopping into freezing cold water for a short time. But that being said, there is something called the mammalian diver's reflex, which what will happen is when you duck your head under the water, which a lot of
Right.
people don't recognize this, you duck your head under the water, it will shift your body into a calmer state.
Mm.
And it's a physiological response. But if you only go like up to your neck, you're not going to get that same reflex. You're going to have that really high heart rate. And then there's another side to it too. You get something called cold shock proteins released from the liver. And
Right.
those cold shock proteins actually have a lot of benefits in the body in terms of healing and initiating a healing response in different tissues. That being said, you got to be able to tolerate that initial
Right.
shock.
So that idea of an ostrich sticking his head in the sand, like that's usually that sounds like a bad idea, right? Like you're going to try to hide from your problems, but maybe sticking your head in some cold water would be a good solution.
Yeah, it's not easy to do though. The first time I did it here in Ashland in the winter,
Oh wow.
like early morning
Like the
before
polar
work.
bear plunge kind of
Yeah,
idea.
I
Yeah.
bought one of
Yeah.
those inexpensive tubs that you get and fill it
Right.
with water, the blow up ones, and I let it sit overnight, and then went out there, and it was really close to freezing because I had to
Right.
break the ice, and I hopped into it, and that was intense.
That'll
That
make you
was
feel
super
alive.
intense. Oh yeah, yeah.
That kind of segues me over to the concept of breath work because, say, with the cold, Wim Hof method of breathing has become popular recently, and that works, and it's a big deal. And if you haven't checked out that work, you might want to look at it. But there's many different variations of breath work. And I love it. This is an example of where we're starting to blend some of the Eastern practices with the West. One of the breath works, for instance, that I'll use in my own office is called SRI, somato-respiratory integration. The part about it that I like, it incorporates some of the other things that people may know about, but it's following the arc of healing. And so, where are you at in one of these 12 different breath stages that follows your healing? Because if you're in a state of great pain, your breath is totally different than if you're having an ecstatic, enlightened moment. But by recognizing where am I at right now today in this moment, and then matching a breath work exercise with it, it can help me go in, be with whatever's going on, and then with more ease and grace to move through that and do it rapidly. So it's just awesome. Breath work is awesome. So I encourage people to just find any breath work near you that you can to get you started and get started on that path. The breath is more powerful, in my opinion, than we give it credit. We think about chemicals in the body or maybe some electrical impulses moving through the nervous system. Breath is super powerful, and in the West, we have not fully recognized what it can do.
Yeah, so I'll share an interesting blip about Wim Hof. There's a
Okay.
video on YouTube. You guys can watch this if you're interested in seeing it. It's basically where Wim Hof went to see, this is the story that I heard.
Okay.
We'll see. It gives it a breakdown on YouTube, pretty good. But Wim Hof went to his physician, and his physician was checking all of his blood work and saying he wasn't looking like he had any illness or anything like that. And basically, he said, I don't get sick anymore. And he's thinking, yeah, you don't get sick. He's, no, I do my breath work and I don't get sick. And this physician had enough of a setup, I think, wherever they were, to test this hypothesis or this thing that he was
Right.
claiming. So basically, what he did is he said, hey, you know what? We can test this. I can inject you with the shell of a bacteria, like a polysaccharide shell of the bacteria, and initiate like what your body thinks is an infection.
Okay.
And you'll have a fever and you'll feel really sick, like that kind of shakes and get
Okay.
cold and all that. And Wim goes, you know what? Let's do it. So he goes in, he does it, and he injects him, and he does this breathing technique and never gets sick. Like he doesn't have any response. His temperature never goes up. He has no response. And that kind of blows him away. And he goes, no, seriously, I could, not only could I do this, but I could teach other people to do this. So he gets a group of other people and they set up the same kind of thing
Right.
again with a bunch of other people, and he teaches them for a period of time these breathing techniques. They go in, they inject them with these endopolysaccharides, and what ends up happening is none of them get sick, which is pretty cool. And that technique that Wim Hof uses is a technique that, here's what I'm just going to tell you my
Sure.
understanding,
Your
which
your
is not,
take.
my
Sure.
take on it is that likely what is going on is it's a technique used by the monks who lived in cold environments to warm their bodies.
Right.
And one of the ways that you would warm your body is get your body to initiate blood flow, right? And have a strong sympathetic response. That can also help release cortisol and calm down an immune type reaction. So that's my theory about it. And so he does this really deep breathing and he holds his breath for a period of time and he initiates a lot of heat in his body
Yeah.
and can withstand these very cold environments and apparently not get sick very easily.
That's awesome.
Yeah. All right. What's next?
How about here's another one that I really appreciate is acupuncture. What are your thoughts on acupuncture?
I've done a lot of acupuncture. I don't do it here in Oregon because there's some licensing laws here in Oregon in regards to acupuncture. In Arizona, when I was there, we had the ability as naturopaths to do acupuncture because it was within our training. Now, we were not trained in Chinese herbs, but we were trained in acupuncture
Okay.
and Chinese diagnoses. And I think it's a really powerful approach to therapy. I've seen it bring people out of pain. I've seen it make allergies diminish significantly. I've
Right.
seen sinus issues like completely clear.
Right.
So there's a lot of really good things that can come from acupuncture. But here's a question for you. Have you done acupressure as
Yes.
well? And do you
Yes.
think that it is as good as acupuncture? I'm curious.
I will admit that my experience with it is limited. I've done some acupressure, like I'll get the manual out and I'll do it on family or friends. And so I would not call myself a trained acupressurist, if that's the word. But the last time I did this with a family member, there was like a significant release. Now, there were multiple points, maybe 20 points that I had to go in a sequence around the body, but it made a difference. And now, an acupuncture itself, like initially, people will be like, I don't think I want anyone sticking a needle in me. I don't like needles. It It's very shallow, typically, not always, but typically the needles are put in a very shallow way. And if you just close your eyes while they're doing it, there's just a moment of a little minuscule prick, and then you don't feel it at all. And but yet then your body starts to feel really relaxed as those energy meridians inside the body start to connect and do their work. And there's just a lot of power and a lot of this is an ancient, tried and true technique. I have a friend actually who is an acupuncturist, and she was studying to become a medical doctor. And when she was ready to go to medical school, she took a big trip to Nepal, Himalayan mountains, and got really sick. The only doctor there was someone who did acupuncture. And so that's what she received, and it totally changed her life. And she shifted the direction of medicine that she wanted to study. So there definitely are lots and lots of stories like that.
So here's a big question I have around acupuncture. So I know a little bit of the history of it. I've gone over it a couple of times in courses that I've taken. And what's interesting is they actually have these ancient stone needles. And this was something that was done thousands of years ago. And they can predate it. It makes sense because like herbs and stuff like that are going to be probably a little harder to find,
Right.
really ancient
Right.
herbs. I know that they found them, but they predate it very far back and they consider it one of the original medicines that were used. What's interesting though is that in Chinese culture, my understanding is, again, this was explained to me from Chinese medicine perspective. Now, I know a lot of this comes originally from India in that area, but my understanding is that their cultural shift, at some point, there was more herbal medicine being used. And then they integrated the two together and it developed their system of using both, which is traditional Chinese medicine. And it's a pretty profound and incredible system. But one of the big questions I have is how the heck does it work? How does putting a needle into a point in someone's body and not even very deep most of the
Right.
time, like they measure them by something called a kun, which is basically it's based on the person you're working on's
Yeah.
finger size or thumb size actually. And then
Well,
it's
what I
crazy.
have an opinion on this.
Okay, let's hear it.
So the technique that I use uses very light touch as well. And people can, they'll always ask me initially, like, how can that very light touch do anything? Like, that just seems ridiculous. Here's my take. Studying embryology, at first I was like, why do I want to learn about embryology? That just seems ugh. But there's some really cool aspects of that. So one of them is that at about 2 weeks into the cycle of a new embryo, this a human embryo, there are lots of layers and cells that are forming, and things are really starting to take off. There's three main layers or source layers where things are coming from. And the layer that makes the skin, eventually makes the skin, is the same layer that makes the nervous system.
Okay.
Okay, so they're sourced from the same origin point. So light touch on the skin can connect deeply and profoundly with the nervous system. If you go deeper in, then you're into the muscle layer, and the muscle layer comes from one of the other sources. So it's not going to connect with the nervous system in the same way. It's going to be a more of an indirect. So that light touch, because the skin and the nerves are so closely, they come from the same origin. That's my opinion on why that there's that opportunity for access.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read a study one time where they were theorizing that there were these connections between what they call motor end plates, right, on the end of the muscles and certain pressure receptors.
Right?
And so there was this thought process that if you inserted a needle, it could change the induction of that in some
Mm-hmm.
way. It was a research study. I read this like 10 years, 13 years ago. So time's gone by a little bit. But there's a lot of theories out there, and I think from a neurological perspective, that makes the most sense to me, just with the effects that it has. There's definitely some dull aches that can happen too when they put them in those muscles. So certain points, I think, have very different effects
Right.
from a muscular standpoint as well.
I agree.
Um,
So another powerful modality for people to
yeah,
check out. How about light therapy?
I love light
Yeah,
therapy.
tell us some about that.
There's a lot of different light therapies out there. generally speaking, when we're out in the sunlight, we're getting the full spectrum
Right.
at different times of the day of various light therapeutics, would be the way to think of it. However, if you hone it in into one like general wavelength or frequency of light, you can have pretty profound benefits for the body. One of my favorite wavelengths is the red spectrum,
Right.
and that spectrum of light, and it's a very wide spectrum. You have far infrared, and then you have the near infrared.
Right.
And so you have these different frequencies, and they have different effects on the body. But red light in general, at least the studies that they've shown with kind of the laser red light therapies
Yes.
that they're using from MIT, have shown benefits for mitochondrial induction. And so, what does that mean? It means that it stimulates more energy production in the
Right.
body.
Right.
If you think about it, right, chloroplasts,
Right.
right, inside of plant cells, they use green light,
Yeah.
and they're using other light
Right.
and reflecting the green. And so basically what happens is certain wavelengths go in and they stimulate certain processes within that mitochondrial
Organism. Yeah.
chain
Yeah.
of ATP production, and you get an increase, like an uptick. So I think that's really cool as a whole. So red light can be very healing. It can stimulate healing, and it has a place in many different modalities of medicine. Blue light has a place too. Blue light can very much focus and awaken us. Our brains utilize blue light in
Right.
order to basically stimulate wakefulness. And then there's a cycling that occurs as we shift from blue to orange to red that allows us to produce melatonin and ultimately fall
Yeah.
asleep.
Yeah.
Light is deeply effective
And I
for the
think the
body.
average person can get a hold of, let's say, an infrared light panel pretty inexpensively.
Super
And
inexpensive.
so it's definitely
Yeah.
something people could grab hold of. And we've already done a podcast, a whole episode just on light. And that's definitely something you could check out if you're interested in this topic, where we dive into it a little bit deeper. Okay, sound. Sound would be a next adjacent one. What are some of your thoughts on some sound therapies?
Of course, I use that vibroacoustic
Right.
therapeutic approach, but one of the things that I really like, so I like therapies that are more in line with nature
Okay.
because we have evolved or adapted to in a way throughout our existence as human beings with these various aspects of physical reality. So
Right.
you have sound and light and smell and taste and touch, and all of these things can have profound effects on us as human beings. And so sound is a resonant frequency, and there are certain effects that can happen from those vibratory frequencies that can have profound effects on the body.
Yes.
So 40 hertz is one of my favorite frequencies, at least has some really good research that decreases inflammation throughout the body,
Right.
creates muscle relaxation, and it also improves blood flow. But one of the biggest things is neuroinflammation. So you can see studies where it helped patients with Parkinson's disease. And so 40 hertz is a really good sound therapeutic frequency,
Right.
but they all are at for different things, right? I'll give one more example.
Okay.
Sorry if I'm talking
Okay.
too
No,
much.
no. Go ahead.
One of the most recent modalities that's out there in cancer therapy is something called histotripsy. And what they're utilizing is a specific ultrasound frequency that they aim. Now, it's only FDA approved at this point in time to target cancer cells that are like large tumors in the liver. And so that's where it's currently being used, which is a major issue. Like when
Right.
you get cancer in the liver, a lot of
Right.
times it progresses and it's really hard to get ahead of. And so ultimately, what they've done is they put you in this water bath and they put the ultrasound like into the
Yeah.
water and they shoot it, they 3D map it out and they shoot the frequency right at the right point where it stimulates
Yeah.
the production of these little gas bubbles inside of the cells. And so the gas bubbles create havoc and the cells die.
Yeah.
And what's cool is it doesn't seem to hurt the much
Normal
cells
cells. Yeah.
around it. And
Yeah.
so it's profoundly beneficial modern therapy that hospitals are starting to really develop out that has saved already a number of people's lives.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And it's sound
Right.
therapy.
Even something simple I might go to, let's say, a place where there's a person that does singing bowls, and you're lying on like a yoga mat and the lights are dimmed a little bit and they're playing these sounds, these frequencies, and it just starts to really relax you and drops you into a meditative space. And we need to drop out of that alertness, those beta brain waves, and then healing be ushered in. I love the singing bowls. They're awesome, and it's a great way to bring some relaxation into the everyday space.
Yeah, and I've been talking a lot about the physical effects of sound from the standpoint of cellular vibration, but there's another side to it too. And of course, it's still cellular vibration at the
Right?
core, but just this, our brain's interpretation of sound can have profound effects emotionally and physically. And
Right.
so, you know, tell me a little bit more about the Safe and Sound protocol in that
Right.
regard. I know you talked a little bit about it,
Yeah.
but
As I mentioned, the human voice is it makes us feel safe. I had a family member, for example, a younger person in the family that was having a lot of stress and having a hard time go to sleep. And so this particular person started to pull up on one of the channels. They pulled up Bob Ross videos. So if you remember Bob Ross from the 70s, he's the white guy with the afro that did the painting. And number one, he made it look really way too easy. But two, the bigger part was that his voice, oh, now we're going to add a little bit of red here for this. And he just had this
add a
deep,
little bit of red.
deep, very soft, soothing voice. And like for this particular family member, like that would just put her straight to sleep. And so that's an example of how that human voice, it makes us feel safe. And I don't know if that ties in with what you're really asking me, but yeah, sound therapies, man, they're amazing.
Yeah, it's just think of the music that you've heard that
Right.
just totally puts you in a state of
Yeah.
it brings you to tears sometimes.
Yes.
Like how profound sound can have an effect on our mental emotional state.
And when I'm doing sessions in my office, I'm going to choose from different playlists that I've crafted to set the stage. So if someone is in kind of the beginning of care and we need to just release some bound up tension in the body, that needs to be that meditative, relaxing type of sound that just helps them drop out of that beta state. Now, later in care, when we've done a lot of release, now let's upgrade the system. Let's build energy. So now I want something that's got more of a driving tempo to it
Yeah.
because we want to build energy. We don't want to just always only relax.
Yeah.
So sound and music they're just wonderful, wonderful
A
tools.
thought that's coming to me too now is a meditation, which
Uh,
was something very popularized by Wayne Dyer.
okay.
And what he would recommend people do is they do two different kind of sound-based meditations.
Okay.
And I'm going to share this because I think
Okay.
it's
Do
something
it.
people can find benefit from, our two amazing listeners right now. And thank you for all the hearts. So basically, japa meditation, what Dr. Dyer would recommend is in the mornings, you would wake up and that was your creative time period. That was the time that you were looking to focus on what you
You're
wanted
open.
to create
You're
throughout
really
your
open.
day.
Yeah.
So you would do what he called an awe
Mm.
meditation. And the awe meditation, he gives all of these examples of the name of God, but also you just think like when I'm feeling good, I say, ah, that that sound has a very relaxing, like calming effect to it in itself. So he would do the ah, and as you're doing the ah meditation, what you did is you'd come up with a word and you would think of that word, whether it was love or light or something, and you'd see the word and you'd see a single,
Mm.
as you're doing your deep breath in and out, you'd see the word pulse in and out. As you're breathing out, you do the sound. And so you would see like the L, right?
Yeah.
And then you would bring the L up. And then as you breathed out and said that ah, you would look to the
Mm.
space between the letters
Okay.
and you would focus on that space between the letters. And then you would visualize the things that you would like to see happen that day. So you really put that, I like words like that because you
Right.
can think of, I'm going to experience love today. I'm going to experience light
Yeah.
today, those kind of things. So that's the morning meditation.
Okay.
Then at night, what he would do is he would do the meditation. And that was the closing meditation. And so you would do the same thing. You'd come up with a word, you would take that deep breath in, and you'd go to the space between the letters as you breathe out, and you would use and hold that until you completely breathed out. And as you were doing that meditation, you would share gratitude, feelings of gratitude, and you'd think about all the things you were thankful for that happened.
Right.
And what this process did is it not only calmed and relaxed and made our bodies in a state of parasympathetic state, it moved blood flow to the brain.
Yeah.
And now we're creating gratitude for the things we
Right.
loved that day and inspired vision of the things
Right.
we want to have happen. And so it's this manifestation miracle type of meditation.
Maybe
So,
just to close, I want to just piggyback off of what you just said, because you said so much. First, I want to go
yeah.
look that up and do it. But back when I was a younger person in education, what's your philosophy of education? And for me, my philosophy, even for what I do now, is aha. Okay. AHHA. Aha. So that you were talking about with the meditation in the morning. I love that. And then aha is I got it. I've learned this concept. The light bulb just turned on. Okay. Now, the ha also means laughter. Ha ha.
Yeah.
Laughter is such a powerful modality. I was in middle school education for a long time, and research at the time was showing that middle schoolers laugh 7 times more than adults do. If you don't believe it, hang around with them. They knock a pencil off the table and they're cracking up, rolling on the floor. And you think, come on, people, come on. But at some point, you start laughing because they're laughing. And the laughter is such great medicine, and it connects our body, our energy center in ways that we don't totally understand. But laughter is a great modality. And I've got a list of about 20 more modalities that we could talk about. Maybe we want to do another one of these sessions in down the road. If you've been listening today and you're resonating with any of these that we've been talking about, please share. If you got some other ideas of great modalities that you like, please let us know. Those could be a great
Yeah.
jumping off points for us in a future one.
Also follow us on
Yeah,
TikTok because we're going to be doing these lives more regularly, probably
right.
over time. Thank you for tuning in the whole time today. All right, guys, I think we're going to close it out. This has been Spirit RX Podcast. Go to spiritrxpodcast.com to learn more. Thank you guys for tuning in. All right, take
Take
care.
care. Be well.